When people think of Jason Voorhees, what image immediately comes to mind? Most people don't picture the final chapter Jason Voorhees from Part 4, they don't picture the zombie version from Jason Lives or the decaying look from The New Blood. They picture one thing, the hockey mask. And that hockey mask didn't exist until Friday the 13th Part 3. Today, I'm going to explain why Part 3 Jason isn't just one of the best versions of Jason, he's the single most important version in the entire franchise. Let's get started. First, we have to talk about the hockey mask because it's impossible to overstate how important it is. Before Part 3, Jason was recognizable only to fans who had seen Part 2. He wore overalls, long hair, and a burlap sack over his head. It was creepy, but it wasn't iconic. Everything changed when Shelley was killed by Jason off-screen and Jason took hockey mask and put it on, and horror history was made. That one moment transformed Jason forever. Think about it. If someone asks you to describe Jason Voorhees, you're probably going to mention the hockey mask before anything else. That mask became Jason's identity. It's on movie posters, it's on video games, it's on action figures, it's on t-shirts, it's on Halloween costumes, it's on comic books, it's on almost every piece of Friday the 13th merchandise ever made. Without Part 3, none of that exists. That's why this version is so important. Another reason Part 3 Jason is the most important is because this movie established Jason's permanent appearance. Every version afterward borrowed something from Part 3. The hockey mask stayed. The green work clothes became part of his design. The intimidating body language continued. The silent stalking continued. The massive physical strength continued. Even when Jason became a zombie in later movies, the foundation was still Part 3. Those films weren't creating a brand new Jason. They were building on what Part 3 created. That's a huge reason why this version matters more than any other. Now, let's talk about Richard Brooker. Richard Brooker gave Jason a completely different personality without saying a single word. His movements felt animalistic. Sometimes he walked slowly. Sometimes he sprinted. Sometimes he stood perfectly still. Every movement made Jason feel unpredictable. Brooker also made Jason look curious at times. He wasn't just a mindless killer. He looked around rooms. He inspected objects. He reacted to people. He almost felt like a hunter studying his prey. That performance became the blueprint for future actors. Many Jason actors have been fantastic, but Richard Brooker created the foundation they could build from. Without his performance, Jason may never have become the horror icon we know today. Another reason Part 3 Jason is the most important is because this was the movie that truly turned Jason into the face of the franchise. Remember, in the original movie, Pamela Voorhees was the killer. In Part 2, Jason was introduced as the murderer, but Part 3 made audiences fall in love with Jason himself. After this movie, Jason became the attraction. People weren't buying tickets because of Camp Crystal Lake anymore. They were buying tickets to see Jason. That's a massive shift. The franchise changed from being about mysterious murders to being about watching Jason terrorize another group of victims. That formula lasted for decades. Part 3 also gave Jason some of his most memorable moments. The spear gun kill, the machete attacks, the unforgettable barn finale, Chris fighting Jason, Andy's handstand kill, and finally, Jason taking an axe to the head. These scenes are still talked about over 40 years later. That's not an accident. They're memorable because Part 3 understood how to make Jason feel larger than life. The movie also gave Jason one of the best locations in the franchise, Higgins Haven. The barn is almost as iconic as Jason himself. When fans think about Part 3, they immediately picture Jason standing in that barn wearing the hockey mask. That setting became unforgettable. Another reason Part 3 Jason is so important is his balance. He's still human. He can run. He can feel pain. He gets injured. He bleeds. But he's also incredibly powerful. That combination creates tension. You believe the heroes have a chance, but you also believe Jason could kill them at any second. Later zombie versions became nearly unstoppable. They're fun, but Part 3 Jason feels more grounded. That realism makes him even scarier. He's not supernatural, he's a man who is unbelievably dangerous. That's terrifying. Part 3 also influenced the horror genre outside of Friday the 13th. The hockey mask became one of the most recognizable symbols in entertainment. Even people who've never watched a Friday the 13th movie know who Jason is. That's cultural impact. There aren't many horror villains whose appearance alone is instantly recognizable across the world. Jason reached that level because of Part 3. You could even argue that this movie saved Jason's legacy. Imagine if Jason had stayed with the sack forever. Would he still be as famous today? Maybe. But it's hard to believe he'd have become one of horror's biggest icons without the hockey mask. Part 3 gave him an image no one could forget. That's why the movie is such a turning point. When people rank the greatest horror icons, Jason is always mentioned alongside Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Ghostface. That wouldn't have happened without Part 3 defining who Jason was. Finally, let's compare this version to the others. Part 2 deserves credit for introducing Jason as the killer. Part 4 expanded his brutality. Part 6 reinvented him as a supernatural monster. Part 7 gave him one of his coolest designs. The remake modernized him. All of those versions are important, but every single one of them exists in the shadow of what Part 3 established. Without Part 3, there is no iconic hockey mask. Without Part 3, there is no definitive Jason design. Without Part 3, Jason probably doesn't become one of the most recognizable horror characters ever created. That's why, in my opinion, Part 3 Jason isn't just the best version, he's the most important version. He created the identity that carried the franchise for decades. He gave Jason his legendary look. He gave him his signature presence. He gave him his place in horror history. And because of that, every version of Jason that came afterward owes something to the man who first stepped out of that barn wearing a hockey mask. That's why Part 3 Jason Voorhees will always be the most important version of Jason in the Friday the 13th franchise. Without Part 3 Jason, the Friday the 13th franchise simply wouldn't be what it is today. But that's just my opinion. Do you agree that Part 3 Jason is the most important version of Jason? Or do you think another version deserves that title? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.